is $1.6 trillion, while on anti-aging research is totally spent less than 1 billion. So in 1,000, more than 1,000 times less than on killing people. And the fact that this money is not spent on scientific research is infringing our fundamental right to be alive. And in fact, all public and private institutions and corporations that do not spend resources to prolong life are taking your life. Soccer stadiums are taking your life. They're killing you. Churches are killing you. Everyone has the right to fight for their lives. And we need to fight to raise the value of longer life. Because if we have value of life extension, we will have social demand. Could you make next, please? Next, please. So this is Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Next, please. And this is the third article, that everyone has the right to life, liberty and security of the person. And next. But a lot of money is spent on these beautiful but dangerous and useless things. Next. And we see that the military budget is much larger than anti-aging spending. Next. And soccer stadium will also cost more than all money spent on anti-aging research. Next. So we need to raise awareness about value of life extension, and to do it, I suggest to do public actions. And in fact, we did, from last 2 years, we did several public actions. I mean street action like demonstration and pickets and meetings. So this is a photo session of famous Maria Konovalenko, Kremlin behind, and I'm making this photo. Next, please. And this is the demonstration in Belgium, which I have organized in 2012. And you see that there was a conference like this about age topics, and after the conference, I took printed banners and go to the Central Plaza, and this is a futuristic Christmas tree behind. Next, please. And this was an action in Cambridge, an creative party and a demonstration. Next. And Hank this year wrote an article a week ago that it stated there is no any political actions in the United States about life extension. And I understand that because I'm now here and I know how to organize it. We immediately to start it, and we organized action in 2 cities simultaneously, in New York, in San Francisco. And in New York, there was a beautiful lady, Sarah, who went to the Union Square with our slogans. But the model action took place in a Googleplex. Next, please. So me and Jason, who is already here somewhere, and also Michael, Jason, come. Yes, this is Jason, this is me, and also Michael Anisimov. This is a slogan, one of the slogans behind the stage. So Michael Anisimov, who will be here, who was speaking here, he did these photos, and this stood there for 10 minutes, and then Google security cars arrived and said it's private territory, I'm protesting for something, and they said, no, we are not protesting, we are supporting Viva Calico. We wanted you to realize your promise that you did in the Time magazine to solve death and to realize definite life extension. Next, please. So we were supporting them, and there was a big rain, and I hope that now the drought will be over in California, because we all started this, and next year. So there are some people passing by that don't believe umbrella, and this is Android sculpture in Google Plex. So it is quite easy to organize such action. You can just print and these slogans and make photos on with landmarks behind you and put them in Facebook, and it will promote the value of life extension. And I encourage everybody, even you who hear my word, to do it. Thank you very much for your attention. Any questions? Okay. Okay. But we will do it again. In fact, we don't know. It depends on how we now communicate. Maybe we would decide today. But we can make, even now I have one slogan with me, and we can do photo session and print it immediately in Facebook. And already when the Stolerov had a photo with the Google banner and the no war, also I said that we should be against any possible war, because we need life extension, we make love no war. So I encourage everybody to take photos with the banner, and I will do it with you. Okay?
Can you reach out to Elon Musk?
Say again, please.
Can you reach out to Elon Musk?
I can't reach out to Elon Musk, unfortunately. But I think that maybe such action are best ways to reach such people. Because, for example, photos from my action was published in Kurzweil AI net site, is somehow connected to Kurzweil. So maybe Elon Musk would have a chance to see this, and he would feel more encouraged to support life extension. Okay? Any more questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Next, we're going to have Jenny and Wendy Stolyarov, and they are going to be talking about their children's book. They are selling their children's book, Death is Wrong, in the back there. I think it's a fabulous idea. I have 2 children myself. I tell them all the time that they're not going to die, and they have to take my frozen head out of the freezer at a certain point. And it kind of creeps them out. I said it's either that or I turn into a robot. So they don't like either option. Okay, here they are, Wendy and Jenny.
Thank you, Hank, and thank you everyone for attending. My name is Gennady Stolyarov, or for those of you who speak Russian, Gennady Stolyarov. And
I'm Wendy Stolyarov. Oh, sorry. There we go. They ran out of the little fancy microphone, so I got to use this one. I'm Wendy Stolyarov. I'm the illustrator and Gennady's wife.
yes, so Death is Wrong is our illustrated children's book on indefinite human life extension. Today we'd like to talk to you about what motivated us to write this book, what our hopes for this book are, and some exciting ongoing developments with regard to spreading this book to children. So if we could get the next slide, I'd ask you to imagine the year 2045, commonly posited as the year of the technological singularity. And I'd like to ask you the question, what should we fear about the year 2045? Even in transhumanist circles in recent years, there has been a lot of discussion of existential risk, technologies that can go rogue and destroy us all, like rogue AI or the gray goo scenario of nanotechnology. Is that what we should be afraid of? And I would argue no. Rather, what we should be afraid of is stagnation. We should be afraid of the typical day in 2045 being much like the typical day in 2013 when we wrote this book, except farther along the trajectory of decay. So in the year 2045, Wendy and I will be 58 years old, and what I'm worried about is I will wake up on a typical morning, have my morning mug of coffee, much like I do these days, and I will stare into that mug of coffee and wonder, what happened to that singularity that we were promised? Why isn't it here yet? What happened to all the hopes for accelerating technological progress, transforming our lives? Will we, at age 58, and people like us, be seen as quixotic dreamers, fantasizing about a future that never was? Will kids these days, the next generation of young people, not care about advancing technological progress or promoting indefinite life extension, either because they don't understand the feasibility or desirability of it, or because their lives are preoccupied with just survival from one day to the next? Will Luddism and change aversion prevail? Will people who don't want to unleash these technologies take control of the institutions that have the power to regulate progress away? And if we could go to the next slide, I'll tell you what we can do about it. At age 5, I promised that I would devote my life to the struggle against senescence and death. This is one of the beautiful illustrations from our book of the botanical gardens in the city of Minsk, capital of Belarus, where I was born. And one spring morning in 1993, I was there with my grandmother, just enjoying the sights. It was a beautiful, warm, sunny morning. There was a plethora of life. So many plants were in bloom, there were so many different animals, there was such a richness of color that I can still remember it very vividly. And the thought occurred to me, what a travesty it would be for all of this to just disappear, for not even a memory of it to remain, for an entire individual universe to be snuffed out irreversibly. But what could I do? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a biologist, I can't perform research on life extension directly. And I've been thinking about this for years. What is a unique contribution that I could make to materially improve the likelihood that we will reach indefinite longevity in our lifetimes? Well, I'm lucky. I happen to be married to the best illustrator I know, and I think I can use ideas and advance ideas to a new demographic in an effort to change the world. And if we could move on to the next slide, I'll tell you about why death is wrong is so important. It fills an important void because we as adults can have access to literature on a virtually daily basis with regard to scientific and technological breakthroughs, with regard to the philosophy of transhumanism, with regard to arguments for the feasibility and desirability of indefinite life extension. Not so for children, even though virtually everyone learns about death as a child. And the first reaction is typically one of bewilderment, horror, outrage, fear, and yet almost immediately children are met with comforting excuses, evasions, and rationalizations about why death might not be so bad after all, or even somehow justifiable, or it's inevitable but it's far away, so get it out of your mind, don't worry about it, go on living day to day. We wanted an antidote to that. We wanted children to have a resource to understand that their initial outrage at death is perfectly justified and should be used as a motivator to help advance indefinite life extension. So what does this book offer? It starts with a bit of autobiography about me as a child, growing up in Belarus, then moving to the United States, finding out about death, assembling the knowledge that I now have with regard to the fact that indefinite longevity is feasible and desirable. We offer some examples of beautiful illustrations of long-lived creatures, including the Turritopsis nutricula jellyfish, the giant tortoise. We also have an image of the Methuselah tree, one of the longest living trees in existence in this very state of California. We offer child-friendly summaries of key scientific breakthroughs, as well as Dr. Aubrey de Grey's SENS program, that's Strategies for Engineered Never-Lethal Senescence. We offer child-friendly philosophical arguments for life extension and rebuttals to common tropes like the overpopulation argument, the boredom argument, the argument that you need to do away with the old to make room for the new, as if people were yesterday's trash. We offer some ideas of what a person could do with an indefinite lifespan. projects, opportunities, discoveries that are just not accessible to us with the current lengths of lifespans that we are facing. For instance, interstellar space travel, or becoming very, very wealthy on a modest rate of compound interest. We also offer quotations from 5 great pro-longevity thinkers throughout history, as well as some beautiful portraits by Wendy. These 5 thinkers are Francis Bacon, Benjamin Franklin, the Marquis de Condorcet, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Alan Harrington. If we could move on, the key message that I want to convey to you today is we need a new abolitionism. One of my favorite quotations comes from William Lloyd Garrison, the great 19th century anti-slavery activist, who said, "Urge immediate abolition as earnestly as we may. It will, alas, be gradual abolition in the end. We have never said that slavery would be overthrown by a single blow. That it ought to be, we shall always contend. And I will contend that no truer words were ever spoken when it comes to the abolition of the death of innocent humans. If the entire world were to embrace this cause tomorrow, it would still take decades of scientific breakthroughs in order to make it happen for us. However, we need to want it to happen yesterday. We need to want it to happen 5,000 years ago, because it's only with that attitude that we can gather enough resources, enough support, and eliminate enough barriers, institutional, cultural, philosophical barriers that people might otherwise put in our way. We can move on. We need to raise a new generation of activists. Even a handful of precocious children committed to the prospects of indefinite life extension from an early age could make the difference between us surviving indefinitely and being part of the last generations to die. So you can see I'm not just doing it for the children, I am doing it for us. I am doing it for everyone in this audience of every generation, because I believe we each have precious individual universes that deserve and indeed demand preservation. So I urge you to spread the word to libraries, schools, bookstores, children's activity groups, wherever children may be found, so that we can unleash these potential young cosmic revolutionaries. As Alan Harrington put it, we must remember that we are cosmic revolutionaries, not stooges conscripted to advance a natural order that kills everybody. If we could move on, I'll tell you how to obtain it. You can obtain it on Amazon or on CreateSpace in the paperback version, or at this very conference where we're selling it for $6, which is the lowest price you'll find anywhere, especially for an autographed copy. There's also a Kindle version for 99 cents on Amazon. That's a great read for adults. For children who often will not have unfettered access to electronic devices, the paperback version would probably be a better bet. This book has received some excellent reviews. B.J. Murphy of the Proactionary Transhumanist said this is the book he wishes he had read as a child. Zoltan Istvan, best-selling author of The Transhumanist Wager, who will be here later today, said this book is well written, well illustrated, and a fantastic read. And Professor Charles N. Steele said, I recommend this one without reservation. It's worth reading. And actually earlier this week there was an article on Fast Company about this book, where the reviewer essentially said that this is not just a great book for children, it will also strike deep philosophical chords in adults. So this is a book for everybody, really. And I'm even more excited about the next slide, because just 1 week ago, we initiated an Indiegogo fundraiser titled Help Teach 1,000 Kids That Death is Wrong. This is a fundraiser in conjunction with MILE, the Movement for Indefinite Life Extension. It's an idea that won the MILE Activist Contest in January, so we decided to implement it. The goal is to raise $5,000 to distribute 1,000 copies of Death is Wrong to longevity activists throughout the country for distribution to children in their local areas. These are people who are aware, perhaps, of some promising recipients of this book. The book would be given to children free of charge, so one condition of receiving the books paid for through this fundraiser is the activists may not resell them. We, as the authors, can order highly discounted copies from CreateSpace, ship them to the activists directly for distribution, and we are setting this up as a flexible funding campaign, which means no matter how much money we raise, all of it will be spent on getting copies of this book out to children. I'm pleased to announce we're already 12.6% of the way to our goal. We've raised $130 so far in just the first week. And I'm even more pleased to announce the first shipment of 11 books has actually been sent out just a few days ago. So this is happening. It's happening right now, and we would really welcome all of your support. Thank you so much for all of you who have contributed already. The deadline to contribute is April 23rd, 2014, so there's a bit of time, but you know how quickly time passes. That's why we're here. So I urge you all to contribute today. And that concludes my remarks. I'll let Wendy say a few words about her art and what inspired her to create the beautiful illustrations in this book.
Thank you. My presentation is going to be quite a bit shorter than yours. Just a few remarks. But Gennady and I worked intimately on the creation of both the text and the illustrations. He took the lead on the text and I took the lead on the illustrations, but everything was a mutual brainstorm. Hang on, I'm getting to move quickly on microphone. There we go. We talked about a whole bunch of different creatures that don't senesce, but we settled on Turritopsis nutricula, the Methuselah tree, the giant Galapagos tortoise, and various other animals that come across very well to children. I think that there are some animals like the lobster, for example, that are a little less cute, perhaps a little less child-friendly, but they're all digitally hand-painted. I used graphics tablet and special digital painting software to create the images, and it was really a delight working with you, Gennady. You're an excellent client.
Thank you.
But this is a fantastic opportunity, especially for those of you who don't have children of your own or don't personally know any children. This is a great way to get the book into a child's hands, even if you don't know one yourself. So if you have any questions about the creation of the book or our reasons or anything at all, I'd be happy to take them. I think we have about 3.5 minutes left.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're at 12.5 minutes.
Yes, so 2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes.
Yes, question here.
So, we go to Google and type Indiegogo Death is Wrong?
Gennady's business cards at the back there have the URL on them.
Okay.
If you come by our table, you can pick up a business card and it has the web address on it.
And the title of the fundraiser on Indiegogo.com is Help Teach 1,000 Kids That Death is Wrong. So you'll be able to find it like that. If you Google Death is Wrong children's book, you would get it as one of the
Yeah,
results
it'll
as
come
well.
up. Any other questions?
All right.
Well, thank you all
Thank
so
you very much.
Couple of announcements. I just ate some of the Uruguayan grass-fed steak. It's really good. You're going to start smelling it pretty soon, and it should be available at the break. Also, we're still working, of course you know this, but we're still working on the Wi-Fi. I think we're now at the point of perhaps calling Verizon or something. Something like that is going on. Yeah. Okay. Before we introduce our next speaker, I want to introduce Grant Rudolph. He's a psychotherapist and meditation teacher, and he's going to tell you about his setup that he has in the next room and that he'd love to have you try out.
Good, thank you. The future is here. We now have the technology right here that we can read the brain waves with a few wires for a couple of seconds, mirror them back to the brain, and it uses that information to sort through the priorities and drop it with all those noisy, repeating survival thought patterns that we all wish would go away. I want to work on as many people as I can today, so come over and sign up after the break, and you can reboot your brain. Thanks.
Testing, yes. Okay, next we have Andres Gomez Emelson. He is I guess he's the leader of the Stanford Transhumanist Association, which I think is fantastic. I wish every campus had a Transhumanist Association. Let's have a big round of applause for Andres.
Thanks for coming, everybody. So, actually, the previous announcement was very related to the topic of the presentation I was going to give. So, transhumanist visions. If you ask the transhumanists, how do you imagine the future to be, or what the ideal future would be like? you will have as many responses as transhumanists as there are transhumanists. You have like all sorts of like interesting utopian and far-fetched possibilities, such as colonizing the galaxy, or having virtual reality implemented on our senses, or nanotechnology, or transforming into other species and things of that nature. There is one aspect that is certainly not neglected, because clearly the previous presentation shows that's not the case, but maybe left aside a little bit, and that is exploring consciousness. Why would we care about exploring consciousness from the point of view of a transhumanist perspective? There are three pretty solid reasons. The first one is that we are consciousness to a large extent. There's like kind of a philosophical sense in which we're consciousness looking at itself. The second reason is that pretty much everything we do is to affect our consciousness in one way or another. We plan our lives so that we have pleasant experiences and we can avoid disagreeable experiences. And similarly, ethics is based perhaps to an entirety on avoiding negative experiences. And the third reason is because there are some really awesome states of consciousness that we don't experience right now that are totally real. And I can actually make Dostoevsky make my point for me. So I'm going to just read a quote from him related to an epileptic seizure that he had. So for several instants, I experienced a happiness that is impossible in an ordinary state, and of which other people have no conception. I feel full harmony in myself and in the whole world, and the feeling is so strong and sweet that for a few seconds of such bliss, one could give up 10 years of life, perhaps all of a life. I felt that heaven descended to earth and swallowed me. I really attained God and was imbued with Him. All of you healthy people don't even suspect what happiness is. That happiness that we epileptics experience for a second before an attack. Well, if Dostoevsky is willing to give his life for this sort of experience, it's clearly something very valuable. Next slide. Okay, so right now, in terms of having a paradigm for how to explore consciousness and all its possible, all the varieties of consciousness, we don't really have a paradigm. We are in what you could describe as the pre-Galilean era of consciousness. Galileo would look at the sky and say, look, if you just look at it closely, you will realize that there is so much structure out there that we have no idea what it is. And you just need to get a telescope and you will see that those dots actually form interesting patterns. And there's like probably a lot of things out there. Priests didn't really believe him, or they even like didn't quite even want to look through the telescope because that was such a difficult thing to accept for their worldviews. And right now as well, we know of a lot of people who say, well, there is this incredible variety of states of consciousness that have literally nothing to do with human consciousness. There are some ways to access them, but there is a lack of a formal, paradigmatic way to approach the problem. And that's why I propose we essentially inaugurate the field of consciousness engineering. To begin sort of describing a tentative way to explore the varieties of conscious experiences, the best thing I can do is essentially characterize the way in which we do that already. And there are two subfields that we already use, both in academia and in normal life. Next slide. So these two fields could be divided as the phenomenal exploration of the qualia space. It's things for the phenomenal exploration of qualia space, and on the other side, you have the computational, algorithmic, and systemic substrate loop. It will make a little bit more sense as I explain them further. Next slide. So some examples of the phenomenal exploration loop. You have, for example, Buddhist monks achieving these really intense, ecstatic, blissful experiences being recorded through EEGs, fMRIs, and all sorts of other ways to try to reproduce and understand what parts of the brain are activated in what ways so that these experiences can be reproduced. You also have the entire psychonaut community that essentially is characterizing how different substances and different combinations of activities and settings instantiate different realms of consciousness. In a more mundane, but still very significant way, you have things such as perfumery. People who create perfumes have isolated very specific aromatic substances that, when combined in specific ways, can instantiate very specific and interesting spaces of qualia in terms of odor. And then you also have music in its entirety. In a sense, we have isolated the components of music, and even though we don't really understand the state space of music, we have at least a little bit of an idea of how to instantiate different regions of it. Next slide. Here is sort of like an amateur approach to the qualia field exploration. Essentially, this friend of mine posting in Nootropics is using biofeedback experiment, measuring his brain waves as well as all of his biomeasurements in order to detect how nicotine affects his body. Next slide. Okay, so how would success look like in this first loop of exploration of a qualia space? What I would describe as success in this case would be, on the one hand, a full characterization of the state space of a region of consciousness, and on the other hand, instructions for how to get to any of those regions. In the case of color, we already have succeeded, according to this definition. We have characterized the state space of phenomenal color, and we can reproduce it in a variety of ways, more straightforwardly by adjusting the intensity of blue, green, and red in computer monitors. More so, people have done research for how we map out the different regions of this state space into common language. This is actually from XKCD. You see this unfolded cube that characterizes the state space of color and how it's divided in different regions that have different names according to how we perceive them. So this is success. This is the kind of thing that we would want to have for other alien state space of consciousness. Really sort of having the sense of what is possible within them and how to get to the different regions. Next slide. Okay, so on the other loop, the other thing that we do, the computational, algorithmic, systemic substrate. To sort of understand the contrast that there is between these two groups, you could think of it in a simplified way as the first one referring to how things feel, and the second one referring to how things function. In a more formal sense, the second one tries to characterize the information processing capabilities of different forms of consciousness. Next slide. Currently, in cognitive sciences, the way in which we approach this problem is, there was a difference in formatting, but anyway, the way in which we approach this problem is by dividing the problem into three distinct levels. In order to understand an information processing system, you can try to first characterize it in terms of what it can do, that is the function and the computation it can perform. In terms of understanding the human brain, according to this approach, we have psychology. The second level is understanding the algorithms that allow the first level to take place. And in a sense, there are many algorithms that can accomplish the same thing. So in a sense, the first level is under constraint by the second. And the third level is the implementation level. That label should be here. But in the case of computers, the implementation level is the level of circuits. In the case of brains, the implementation level is the level of neurons and synapses. And again, synapses and circuits can implement a whole variety of algorithms, and a whole variety of algorithms can implement different solutions to problems. Next slide. Some examples of current research in this area. Well, essentially the whole field of cognitive science, but just to name a few to make it concrete, you have optogenetics, where you're activating selectively or inhibiting selectively different parts of the brain of a rat with light. That allows you to characterize the functionality of different brain modules. You also have psychometrics, which essentially find out what is the information processing constraints of the human brain. Then you also have even biological algorithms, such as mold or fungi, exploring a region, trying to find resources to survive. And my favorite in this slide is that one, which is essentially form constant. These are the sort of patterns that people experience during migraines or intense hallucinatory experiences. And it turns out that you can explain these patterns by parameterizing a few differential equations that describe the relative activation and inhibition of different regions of the visual cortex. And it's fascinating because in a way you can selectively instantiate different patterns like these by just tweaking the parameters slightly, and you get different things. This, in a sense, kind of intersects with the phenomenal exploration loop, but it's definitely still grounded in the functional one because it allows you to use models to instantiate different computational patterns that allow you to process information. Okay, next slide. And this is my own research. I'm currently doing a master's in computational psychology at Stanford, and my thesis essentially is on characterizing the state space of emotion. We have a database where like millions of people have explained how they felt day after day, and I have characterized fully the transition probability between different states of consciousness and emotions. And if you group them, if you show them like this, you're going to use like a lot of algorithms to essentially group the emotions into local attractors, kind of groups of emotions that if you fall into them, you're very likely to continue to be there, and they have a higher within transition probability than you would expect from random chance. This definitely falls in the functional characterization of consciousness, and also it allows you for engineering, because if you can understand the dynamic processes that underlie the transitions in emotions, you can tweak very slightly some transition probabilities, and that could have tremendous implications in terms of the base rate of different emotions, just by simply what are the base rates that emerge out of different transition probability matrices. Next slide. Okay, so how do we use these two current approaches to bootstrap our way into exploring every state of consciousness? Something that we currently don't do, and I might be wrong about this, but this is the approach I propose. So I propose that we connect these two approaches, and so that we can create a feedback process between them. In the first level of connection, we have the phenomenal exploration of qualia spaces feeding on to the computational algorithmic systemic substrate loop. How would this look like? It would look like essentially using qualia permutations that we have acquired to enhance representational systems so that we can increase computational power of our conscious experience. To give a straightforward example, imagine that you're colorblind. If you're colorblind and you all of a sudden do this very expansive exploration of consciousness and you realize that there's this other way of representing vision that includes phenomenal color, you can say, hey, maybe I can recruit phenomenal color to represent different properties in my vision. And if you do that, then you are able to represent more information in your conscious experience and characterize the world in a more sophisticated and perhaps accurate way if you wire the color properly. And the second, the loop back arrow, it's also pretty interesting. Here what you would be doing is employing the acquired computational capabilities of the second loop to systematically record, explore, and reverse engineer the structure of further qualia spaces. Essentially, as our memory becomes better and our ability to voluntarily explore different regions of consciousness become better, our ability to understand what we haven't yet understood also becomes better. One example that I have here is something that we can do by understanding the algorithmic processes that underlie motor cognition, is wiring our parietal lobe, essentially our motor cortex, into our visual cortex, so that by the feeling of movement, we can activate different parts of the visual cortex. Essentially, if we do that, we could create any image, three-dimensional image we want, just by dancing or something along those lines. So again, here what you have is a deeper understanding of the computational, algorithmic, systemic, or substrate level fitting on to the exploration of phenomenal qualia. And some suggestion of how we may possibly essentially spiral and bootstrap ourselves into a full description of consciousness. I don't think it's going to go this way, but it's just a suggestion, at least like a proof of concept that there might be a pathway. So first we can characterize colors, tastes, textures, sounds. Following that, we can understand the algorithmic implementation of hedonic tone. This is something that David Pierce would really enjoy if we were able to instantiate pleasure whenever we want, so that we don't have to suffer if we don't want to. Then we can also explore high-level cognition varieties. This is something that we don't really realize most of the time that is a variable in consciousness, but it totally is. You have, for example, intuition or perspective taking, narrative taking. All of these are different modes of consciousness, and you can tweak them through different methods, and you can also, in principle, recruit them to improve your capability to explore further consciousness. In addition, things such as perfect memory, advanced metacognition. One that I think it will take a long time, but it will totally be done, is understanding mystical experiences, ego death, and the realm of psychedelia. More in the future, maybe experiences of non-human animals, and the ultimate frontier, which we may or may not get to, depending on whether there's like any possible way of putting them in the framework, is the non-representational regions of consciousness. And yeah, to conclude, the following slide is just an illustration of just probably how ridiculously vast the state space of consciousness is. So we have like the state space of consciousness that humans are able to experience, which includes even Dostoevsky's experiences. So the actual sort of very common experiences would be a tiny, tiny speck in there. Then you have available experiences to animals, and probably the vast ocean of consciousness is non-representational consciousness. And yeah, this is a call to colonize inner space. Thank you.